enough. Let's rock and roll. So what I want to look at today is the Gemara on Hey Amud Beis from the two dots. Tana Rabban and Kdei Bekesef. So we spoke about chuppah. We went through the whole thing of chuppah, and I wanted to start going from there. It's a nice sugya, and there's some interesting things that come out of it that I think that are important for us. It's also from just a structural thing to go through. So says the Gemara. Tana Rabban, Kdei Bekesef. How do you actually do this kesef process? So we know that we know from the Mishnah that kesef is one of the means of doing the Kiddushin, but how exactly does it actually manifest itself? So Kdei Bekesef, so says the Gemara, it's simple. Nasan la kesef, he gives her money, or shava kesef, or the value of the money. So it doesn't have to be exactly it doesn't have to be a coin, right? It can be the equal amount of a coin. That's why we use a ring. And there's all droshes on the ring, but I'm not going to that now. Va'amarla, and he says to her, Harei at mekudeshesli. Behold, with this, Harei, behold, at mekudeshesli. You are mekudeshesli. Harei at muresedli, or maybe you muresedli. They're the similar words, right? So the urasa, mekudeshes. Harei at lila into. You are to me as a wife. Harei zum mekudeshes. In such a case, then it is mekudeshes. How's it? I hope you don't mind. We started.
What's the chab of the word haray?
Sorry, say again.
What's the chab of the word haray? I don't see it in any other form of brachas or things that we're saying, but it seems it's so essential to chubah. Even if we say it in English, we say like behold. Like who uses the word behold in English?
Because but it's like the haray is speaking to the money. So through this action of me giving you the money, right? Natan la kesef gives her the cash and says Harei ad mekudeshes. So the question immediately, it's a good question because what really you ask.
I mean, you can hold it up and say bezeh.
You could, maybe you could. We'll see that. We got to see that. If we get to that Gemara today, we'll see that. It's a little bit further down. Like what exactly the wording can't he use? Okay, we'll see that now. Harad Mukudesh, Harad Mureset, Harad into Harez Mukudeshet. Then it's Mukudeshet. See, it's clear. I mean, Sober, what you're saying really sheds light on the question here because it's absolutely clear that the fact that he's giving her the money is indicative of the fact that he wants to go through a process of something. What is the process? The Kiddushin. He's not just giving her money as a gift. Okay, you with that? Okay,
so maybe there's room to say that this is why like at an engagement there's not a halachic issue of actually giving her a ring because you're not saying anything to it.
Yes.
You're saying as in a modern day engagement when you say, "Will you marry me?"
Marry me, yes.
So maybe that's why you're not saying Harei at.
Correct, and they have to be ADM. It's a whole business. It's not just a simple process. Let's see where it goes because if you don't have the ADM, then there's no ADIS to the Kiddushin. If there's no ADIS to Kiddushin, there's no kiyum of that Kiddushin. Okay, we'll get there. Let's see where we're going then. So comes along the Gemara and says, "Aval hi shenitna va'amra." What happens if she gives the money, va'amra, and she makes the statement, "Hareini mekudeshet lecha," I am mekudeshet to you. Hareini mureset lecha, or I am mureset to you. Hareini lecha leintu, I am your wife. Eina mekudeshes. So we've seen here that we've got this brisa, Tana Rabbanan, right? We've got this brisa. That the brisa presents that if he gives the money or the equivalent of the money, and at the same time he makes a statement, so then there is Kiddushin. The opposite of that is that mentioned as well, and that is that if she says it, the whole thing, and so she gives it and she says it, then it's not. And that's what the Gemara says. On that, Maskif la Rav Papa. Rav Papa jumps on and he says this exactly issue that kind of, I think so that it's talking to your issue here. Maskiv Rav Papa. Rav Papa comes in. What does Rav Papa say? Timer, that the reason why that the Kiddushin is Chal, the Nasanhu va'amaru, because he said he gave it and he made the statement. Ha Nasanhu va'amrahi. What would have happened if he gives the money, but she makes the statement? Eina mukudeshes. There's no Kiddushin. Okay? So Rav Papa said the reason why is because he gives the money and he makes the statement. But if he only has one part in that process, says Rav Papa, Eina mukudeshes. Okay? That's what Rav Papa wants to explain. Ema Seifa, hold on a second, says the Gemara. What about the Seifa, which is Haval hi shenat naloi va'amrahi, when she gives to him and she says, right? Lo chazi Kiddushin, that there is no chazu, means it's not seen as being like a valid Kiddushin. Timer, the reason is the nasnahi va'amrahi, because she did both processes. Hanasanhu va'amrahi. So then the Gemara goes to this discussion. If Hanasanhu, if he gives it va'amrahi and she says it chazu Kiddushin, then maybe it should work. No. So, right, you understand what the Gemara is doing here. The Gemara is saying that it seems to be the way the Brisa presented it is that if he gives, and he says, it works. If she gives and she says, it doesn't work. So the question is, what happens if Nasanhu va'amrahi, he gives, but she makes the statement, Havi Kiddushin, should be Kiddushin. Because that's it seems to be that the only thing that's lacking is him giving. But the minute he gives, why is it so important for him also to have to make the statement? So says the Gemara, Reisha Dafka, Sefer Kdei Nasbah, that the Reisha is kind of like specific, it's Dafka written correctly, but the Sefer, it's just like written by the way. In other words, don't infer anything from the Sefer, because it's kind of like just, Kdei Nasbah means it's like written incidentally, or it's not really needs to be written. It's like, it's just, all it is coming to present the opposite case of the Reisha, but it has no real validity in something that we should learn out of. So don't look at it don't look at it too carefully to learn halacha from. Okay, you with me? And says the Gemara on that, Vatane Sefer mills the Sisra la Reisha. So the Gemara says, so then why would the Sefer come to be Soiser the Reisha? If you don't need it, what's the point of it? Right? Why do I have to bring it in if it's directly contradicting what the Reisha says? There is no value to it whatsoever. Ela hachika amar. I just want to go through the sugya and then we're going to stop. Hachika amar is how you should say. Nasanhu va'amarhu pshita dachazi Kiddushin. When he gives and he says it's pashut. Nasanhu va'amrahi, when he gives and she says nasa kamishinat nahi va'amrahi. Then it's exactly the same as what? As she gave it and she said it. V'lo chazi Kiddushin. There is no Kiddushin. Okay. Maybe you could say nasanhu va'amarhu makudeshes nasnahi va'amrahi eina makudeshes. But Nasanhu va'amrahi, when he gives and she says, Feikahi, it's actually a suffix. And we're concerned midirabonan. We're concerned that by through a drabonan din, that she actually has to be divorced in order for any other Kiddushin to be chal. Okay, so that's the Gemara that I want to look at. So the Gemara presents this very crazy, weird concept. And what's the concept? Reisha dafka, Sefer Kdei Nasbah. Right? That the Reisha is written specifically, but the Sefer is written kind of like, as you said, incidentally. So what bothered me is that, I mean, it's not a new structure. We see this all over, but it's a structure that bothers me, and I never really looked into it. So I thought I'd be my eye on it in a little bit. Like, how can it be that you're telling me that a Tana, we're not talking about you and me, we're not even talking about Moira, We're not talking about one of the Go'inim. We're talking about a Tana. We're talking about a person that we know, that every single word, every single nuance in every word that they say is something for us to learn out of. And all of a sudden, the Gemara presents us with this thing. No, Reisha Daf. Go learn the Reisha. But no, just kind of like ignore the Sefer because there's nothing really to learn out of it. You understand that question? That's like a crazy question. Like, why would we be able to say that a Tana is just like writing, oh, what a nice idea. Let me just like write for the sake of writing. So I searched quite a lot to find it. And I found on the on Yeshivat Shiloh website, I found an answer to it, which is a tshuva. Somebody actually asked a tshuva on this. Asked a Shiloh on this, which is quite an amazing thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen with you. Let me find it first, then I'll share the screen. I'm going to share the screen with you so that you can, we can go through this together, because it sheds a lot of light on an understanding of the structure of the way the Gemara is working in this case. Okay, so give me a second. There we go. Okay, can you all see the screen, guys? Should I make it bigger? Is it fine?
That's good. Okay,
so the Shaila. I'm going to read through the Shaila, and we're going to read through the Tshuva. Shaila shelihi al sugya b'Gemara. It's a Shaila on a sugya. Imagine that. Imagine that, like your community asks you Shailas on sugyas. It's like a different level. Right? I mean, you guys do it, but Kabatznik is very good at that. Right? Especially after you found my shofar as Kabatznik. I'm very grateful, by the way. Okay, so says the Gemara. Shaila shelihi al sugya b'Gemara. Yoser nachon. Lahagdir la'atzmi et klalei Gemara. He says, it's good for me to understand the klalim in the Gemara. Hasugya b'Kiddushin daf hey amud beis omeres, and he quotes our sugya, quotes the whole sugya. He says, Hagemara b'sofa. Oopsie, sorry. Hagemara b'sofa. Yeah, we can say there. Notenet hezber sheyesh ledayek meharesha. The Gemara itself says that you must just be medayek in the resha. V'ilu ala sefer omer Kdei Nasbah. But in the sefer it says Kdei Nasbah, like it's not really important. Achshav ze mamash lo muvan li. I don't understand at all. Ma hatana yachol ledaber shelo letzorich. A Tana is able to write without a need to say it. Why would a Tana say it? Like sometimes we say, and we've learned this in other places, that the Torah goes out of its way to writing. Remember we learned this earlier on, right? Torah chakasal akra. That the Torah goes out to certain things, but that's a Torah process. It's not the way the Tanaim work. So how can it be that the Tana writes something in Shalol Tzorech? Ki yadu li Tanaim meduyakim v'dvarim v'daberim b'divrei Chazal v'chumuvan b'divrei Tanaim hakadoshim nichtavim b'midulak. All the time the Tanaim are very careful. As lama b'duyaka Gemara means Kdei Nasbah. So how come the Gemara says Kdei Nasbah? It can't be that the Tana is not careful in saying what he has to say. Please explain it to me. Okay. So now we're going to go into the tshuva. So this is one of the Ramim at as I said at Shiloh. So he says the following: Bevadai Divrei Tanaim Kedoshim Meduyakim. The words of the Tanaim are Kedoshim, are holy and Meduyakim, and they're very careful in what they say. Ulam. However, yesh liskor, listen careful, because he's going to shed so much light on an understanding of Torah Shebaal Peh. Yesh liskor, shebidivreim ne'emru ba'al peh, toch Kdei limud v'diyon b'beis hamedrash. Where are their words coming from? The Tanaim didn't sit and write books. The Tanaim are sitting in the Beis Medrash and arguing with each other. It's all toch Baal Peh whilst they're learning and they're busy having diyunim in the Beis Medrash. Od yesh liskor, you also have to understand, she'ad tekufas Rebbe, until the point of Rebbe, haTorah sheBaal Peh lo nichtava, it was never written down. Vayatzorech ladat et hamishnayos v'sabraysos mamish Baal Peh. You mamish need to know everything Baal Peh. If you needed to know everything Baal Peh, then what happens? Then you have to create sometimes means of remembering things. Okay? לכן יש מקום בשעה שהגמרא אומרת שמילים מסוימת נאמרו על ידי התנא למסקנה לא משמעות הלכתית. He says sometimes you find words, some words that are brought in that don't actually come to a halachic proper conclusion. יש לבאר זאת בשני אופנים. We can understand that in two ways. האחד, first one, יש מקומות בשעה שהיה רגילוס להשתמש ברשימה קבוע של דינים. There are certain places in Shas where they use a reshima, a list, a fixed list of laws. Va'atana shana is oisa reshima lamrot shebenoise boy who oisek ein kol adinim mediokim. So there's a whole list of things that the Tana says these are the dinim that I'm going to deal with, and you don't always have an absolute meduak in every single din because he's just giving you a basic list of things to deal with. And he quotes from the Gemara in Soita about. He says, yeah, where Mone Rabbi Yosef Glili Rishima Shal Anashim Shenasu Nashim Pasulos. A whole list of people who married women that they weren't supposed to marry. Shechoizim in Melchemes HaRashus, that they have to go from the when there's a war, that's a Rashus war, that we know that certain people don't go into that war. These are the people that don't go, and gives a whole list about all of those things. It says, yeah, over Mavoa B'Gemara Shel Rabbi Yosef Glili Rak Ha'oiver Al Isur Torah חויזר מהמלחמה, ואילו איסור חלוצה לכהן אג'ות רק מדרבנן, וכהן שנעשה חלוצה אינו חויזר מהמלחמה. The Gemara then concludes in that. Al Korchach, therefore, says, is Irat, הובא דין זה במשנה בגלל שיגרס הלושן של התנא של רשימס הפסולים המנויה שם מופיע כך בהרבה מקומות בש"ס. So he's just writing it to make things clear. He's not giving a list that is going to be absolute la halacha. He's giving a list. Sometimes things will be different. There's certain nuances that'll happen. Now, this is what we need to look at. Ha'ofen hasheni, the second way in which things happen. Who? Sheka'amur divrei atanoim hayu ne'emarim ba'al peh. We said the words of the Tanaim were said what? Ba'al peh. V'lifamim divrayim ne'emru b'tzura sheyoser kal zoichrum kach. And because it was all said Baal Peh, sometimes they said ways in which it was easier for them to remember it. Kiddushin, like our Gemara. Lemaskanas Gemara, according to the Maskana of the Gemara, Hareisha Shel Abraisa, Hiya Ikarit. The Gemara is saying, well, it's not saying that he just wrote it. The Gemara is saying that it's the style of that Brisa is such to be able to remember it, but understand that the Reisha is the Ikar. And the Seifa is written in the opposite way from the Reisha. Why? Symmetric. In order to what? To make it an amazing words. You know, all these English words that are translated into Hebrew, nobody can read. Right? In order to make it into a tzura in a manner that is symmetrical. Lamrot, to tell us, b'mikra pachot rachok. To show us that.
Can you scroll down, please?
Sorry, say again.
Can you scroll down, please?
Sure. Now I've lost my place. To show us that even in a mikra pachot rachok, a little bit far, far yesh ba'ya b'kiddushin. So it mentions the one extreme to the other to show that anything in the middle is problematic in the case of Kiddushin. So you understand? So it's what we presented was this case of that how could the Gemara say such a crazy thing, right? But we understand now that the Gemara is saying this because it's all part of the living world of the Gemara. That the world, because the Gemara is all part of this organism that's constantly moving, you need to have ways in which to remember things. The Gemara immediately says that it's not coming, that the end is not coming to be soita the Reisha. It explains it itself, the Gemara. But now the reality is now we can really understand it. Just go and learn Torah. Okay, so in other words, what he wants to say, and that's important, is that the style of the Gemara sometimes needs to be read not in the style what we so used to of taking every single word being meduyak, But the Gemara is empowered to show us that there are certain times within the flow of the Gemara that the style is not muduyak, but rather it's speaking style in order to remember things. That's all. I wanted to show you that. So I think it's an important thing to understand and to actually be a little bit medayik into the Gemara sometimes. Okay. Let's understand what's going on here. Why is it that when he gives her the money and he makes the statement, it works, but when she gives him the money and she makes a statement, it doesn't work? Is it because is it an issue in the money? Is it an issue in the statement? What's the foundation of this whole story? That's what we need to try and understand. Why is there such a problem? So if you look in the Gemara, I'm going to stop sharing. If you look in the Gemara, oh my gosh, shishi. Sorry, guys, my battery just shishi. I need a plug this in. Run. So the Gemara presents us with very little Rashi on this. Very, very little Rashi. At least on the initial conversation. But the Gemara comes and says the following. In the case of, it says the Hachika Amar. This is how the Gemara needs to be read. Says Rashi, Hachika Amar Seifa. Aval she'ena mimashi amru kagoin shenasanu va'amrahi nasa ki ilu nasnahi va'amrahi va'ena mekudeshes deba'inen ki yikach ish. You need to have this concept of ki yikach ish. So how does the ki yikach ish manifest itself? Manifests itself in nasanhu, when he gives. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, oh gosh.
Rabbi Altman's battery died on his computer, so he's dropped out of it. So it's just the three of us at the moment.
Amazing.
So
Good opportunity to hear some Torah from the Gabbai of the Kollel Minyan.
you see the Gabbai he just organizes. He gets the people to speak. He doesn't actually do the speaking. But apparently I'm the host now. So
Guys, so will teach us some Torah.
Aitan, you can. You got a question. You remember the question we're dealing with? This is from the Sugya.
Yeah, but we discussed it like 3 weeks ago. I don't actually remember the question.
No, so all these sugyas seem so arbitrary, like all the conditions of marriage. Like how many of them? This is what Aitan was saying. They're like,
Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. Okay. Sorry, I really apologize. Okay, so let's carry on. So if you look at those Rashis, the Rashis there in the Gemara, are now going to explain. So what does it mean? Where it says there, where the Gemara says Nasanhu, Dami lechi yikach ish. There's something that Rashi wants to tell us, that when he gives the money, that's called ki yikach ish. It's the same as ki yikach ish. Va'amrahi, when she says it, it's dami letikach isha leish, that she is being taken to the man. So Nasanhu, there's something about him giving the money that becomes such an important thing that it may be, the Havamina is that him giving the money is enough. But the minute she says something, it changes that format from there being possibly even a neutral space of maybe that it can work to as if she is being taken, she is taking him in a more active way. So if that's the case, so we understand it's got to be ki yikachish. It can't be in any way that she is the person that is being taken. The Gemara tells there's a fascinating part in the Gemara where it says that Nasan hu va'amrahi. It says Nasa kamish nasnahi va'amrahi v'lo havi Kiddushin. When he gives it and she says it, right? When he gives it, it's kiyikach, but when she says it, she undoes the kiyikach because it's as if she does it. It's as if what? It's as if lo havi Kiddushin. It's not Kiddushin because it's like she's doing everything. So the Gemara later on, which I put on that source sheet for you. The Gemara later on has a fascinating discussion. I want to get it there for you so we can see it. I'll share it with you now. Yeah. So the Gemara says, Tznan, Hayamadaber ima isha, al iske gita v'kiddusha. So this guy's busy speaking to a woman about her get and her Kiddushin. Okay, so obviously, in the one case he's married to her, in the other case he's wanting to be married to her. The one case he wants to get out, the other case he wants to get in, right? So he's v'nasan la gita v'kiddusha, and he gives her. They're just talking about it. There's no specific mention. Harei ad mekudeshet. He gives her the get and the Kiddushin, v'lo pirish, but he doesn't say anything specific. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Dayo. Rabbi Yossi says that's it. It's a valid get or it's a valid Kiddushin. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Tzarich lefaresh. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you're crazy. You have to explain it. Amar Avuna, Amar Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Yossi. But the halacha is like who? The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. So you have this crazy Gemara that comes and says, even if he doesn't actually say something to her, even if he doesn't say it to her, but because they're talking about the conversation about Kiddushin, so therefore it's enough because it's muvan mitoch hadvarim. It's understood from within the words that they're saying that there is Kiddushin in this case. And so here we see, if it's muvan mitoch hadvarim, what does it mean? What is this Gemara doing to us? We said that when he gives her, right? When he gives her, it's ki yikachish. When she makes a statement, it's the opposite way around. But we've just learned that he doesn't have to say anything. All he has to do is what? Is say, he's got a document in his hand, and he'll give that document to her. That's the Kiddushin with a star. V'lo pirei, she gives it to her, and Rabbi Yossi says, that's it. Kiddushin is done. Which means that according to this, it would seem to be that it's in the giving, not in the dibur, that the Kiddushin is ma'akev. You understand that? Okay? If that's the case, so then why would her statement be so problematic? Why is her statement such an issue? So the Tosfos HaRosh says that you got to understand the case. He says, "Hamadaber ima isha beiska gita v'kiddusha, noisen es kiddushin al pi diburo." That when they are busy talking about kiddushin and gittin, right? And when he gives her the kiddushin, in this case, he's not giving her money; he's giving her a get, a document. He's doing it al pi diburo lefichach harei ele kiddushin. It's kiddushin. Achkan b'meduba k'shenoisen lava lo diber b'umaya, where he gives us something, he's not talking about anything. Rakhi amra tein li mana v'skadesh lach as ein ele kiddushin. It's when she says, "Give me something." The minute she opens her mouth, she changes the format of the conversation to his lead, to her lead. And the minute she's leading the conversation, it's no longer going to be a nasan l'shem kiddushin klomar. Af al pi she'en tzarich she'ha'ish yiskaven b'diburo l'shem dibur kiddushin mikol makom tzarich she'adibur she'megale she'netinet hamata etal l'shem kiddushin yaseh al yado. It has to be that the netina, that the giving of the star kiddushin is done with a gilui of words that will come from the conversation that they had, that it's going to be the Shem Kiddushin. So that's fundamentally fundamental for us to understand, is that yes, her words don't really mean that much, except that they remove the focus from his active yikach to her passive yikach, tikach. Okay, you understand that? Everyone happy with that? Okay. Let's carry on a little bit more. So it says the Gemara that we are chashinen midrabanan. Remember we said, why is it a problem? Because the reality is not really a problem. What are we worried about? We chashinen midrabanan. What are we chashinen midrabanan? So we understood Rashi says, when he says yikach and she says tikach, we understand that that's a bit of a problem. And he says here the following. We can understand Rashi. Upshuto nire midivrei Rashi. Shetcharich habaal yaseh tamaisa kiddushin. We have to be clear that there are two aspects in the kiddushin. There's a maaseh kiddushin and there's a statement of kiddushin. And the baal has to be the one who does the maaseh kiddushin. V'kan she'abal oseh rak et hanatina v'lo et hadibur yesh laduna im nechshav shekol hakiddushin nasu al-yado. Why is there safek d'Rabbanan? The safek is whether or not the fact that he doesn't do the whole process, is there possibility? Is it possible that he hasn't done everything? Ho'il v'anatina hi ikar kiddushin. The natina is the ikar of the kiddushin. Or do we say, since she says the words, or we say that once she says something, even though the natina may be the essence, nonetheless it's not sufficient for the Kiddushin to be chal. The Tosfos read. I mean, I've got it for you here, but I'm going to read it to you so we can just go a little bit. The Tosfos read says the most amazing thing. He says that trying to understand the Gemara. He says that Nasan la kesef, he gives her the kesef, shekain derech halakayach. Now he's saying similar to Rashi. Shekain derech halakayach. Why? Because the concept has to be ki yikach. And how does it work when a person takes property and acquires property? What do? They give over the kesef. So therefore we have to understand. So it has to be levachot. It has to be the Baal is giving the kesef, right? He has to. That's what it says. V'alokeachu ze shetzarich l'shalem avur mekacho. V'lachein im ha'isha notenet ha'kesef. If she gives the money, harei hi mochicha bazeh she'hi alokechet. V'doim elechi tikach isha leish lefichach ena mekudeshes. So we understand the giving. He has to do the lekicha to be look like an alokach. But why can it be that she can't make a statement? Why can't she say the words that she why can't she even put it in the passive? Hare ani makudeshet lach. Why can't she make that statement? Why do you need to have him make the statement? I'd like to hear from you. Why do you think that? So you all learned the sugya. And we all learned that we come out in the sugya, there's an issue of a safek d'Rabbanan. But what's the safek? Why is it such an important safek that we spend? And I'm spending so much time on it. What's chashinen midrabanan? What are we worried about? Remember, this is not a normal thing. This is not me going to you, Sobel, or Lior, or Eitan, and I want to buy something from you. And I say, okay, and I give you money, and you say, oh, behold, this thing is acquired to you, right? What's the issue? Number one, we've got to take her out of her chazaka of being single, okay? How do you take her out of a chazaka of being single? Through the process of Kiddushin. But the minute he gives her the money, so she's kind of like halfway out of the process of the chazaka of being single. Now, if she would say something at that point in time, does it complete it or does it undermine it? If it completes it, then what is she? She's an Ashes Ish. Okay? But if it doesn't complete it, then what is she? Then she's free. So Chazal made a decree, they made a gezerah, that we're so worried about the concept of Ashes Ish. We're so worried about her, another man taking her, but in actual fact, she may have some kind of like almost Kiddushin, and therefore Chazal said you can't do it, and there cannot be any statement whatsoever by her in any process of this whatsoever. There's no Kiddushin. We need Kiddushin of that he gives to her. He says the right statement, and from that, we don't have to worry any longer. So let's stop there for today, guys, and then next week, please God, we'll continue with Hayom and Bays, cross over the page, and do quite a lot more of the Gemara itself, rather than going into